Feds just crushed a multi-million-dollar Canadian cartel group after arresting their highest boss, Robbie Alkalil.
Alkalil was the subject of a red notice by Interpol.
One of Canada's most wanted killers, thought he had escaped forever. He broke out of a Vancouver jail, vanished through international borders, and hid in places you wouldn't believe would have him. But now, it's finally over.
The hunt for convicted killer Robbie Alkalil is over. Several sources tell Global News Khalil has been arrested in Qatar. Canada does not have an official extradition treaty with Qatar, but it can make the request.
Interpol agents, local authorities, and Canadian intelligence had been circling for years. Now, there's rumors that the Wolfpack Alliance itself will come tumbling down, that Robbie's arrest was the beginning of a collapse that will shake Canada's underworld forever. Let's break it all down. Qatar is not the kind of place you expect to see a Canadian gangster in handcuffs, but that's where Robbie Alkalil's long run ended, after years of taunting the system and after millions spent on false passports, surgeries, and safe houses.
The hunt for convicted killer Robbie Alkalil is over.
The same man who ordered hits in Toronto cafes and Vancouver hotels, who had built direct cocaine pipelines with the Sinaloa cartel, now stood exposed in a foreign jail, awaiting Canada's call.
Canada does not have an official extradition treaty with Qatar, but it can make the request.
And the irony was brutal. A multi-millionaire crime lord reduced to a prisoner again, just not in the country he had terrorized.
After an execution-style shooting in an upscale Vancouver restaurant, customers flee for their lives. Then, a brazen killing on a busy cafe patio in the middle of a Euro Cup soccer match in Toronto's Little Italy.
After an execution-style shooting in an upscale Vancouver restaurant, customers flee for their lives. This arrest was more than symbolic. The Wolfpack had been Canada's boldest organized crime network, flaunting its supercars in Dubai, its encrypted phones in Mexico, and flexing its power across Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. Robbie was their face. He was so knees-deep in flaunting cartel power that he'd earned the nicknames Honda and Lambo. He was the rags-to-riches ruthless broker who made them a global brand. Now, in cuffs, he became the proof that no gangster is truly untouchable. Robbie had been wanted for murder since July 2022.
Metro Vancouver Crime Stoppers later posted a $100,000 reward for information leading to Alkalil's capture, but admitted it was unclear he was still in Canada, saying he was known to use fake passports and identification.
But even now, in arrest, the story isn't clean. Canada has no extradition treaty with Qatar. Negotiations dragged on for days. Officials wouldn't confirm if Robbie was in their custody, fueling rumors that he might walk free again. For a man already convicted of multiple murders, the thought was sickening. And it gets even more worrying when you realize how his escape was engineered in plain sight. On July 21st, 2022, one of the most dangerous men in Canada simply walked out of a maximum security pretrial jail.
Two men posing as contractors accused of helping a convicted killer break out of prison have now been charged.
It wasn't a riot, a hostage crisis, or bribery, like we're used to seeing in Mexican prisons holding cartel kingpins. This time, it was two men in fake hard hats and reflective vests who showed up at North Fraser with photo IDs, later traced back to an Indian stock photo website. They cut open a steel grate with a plasma torch, and within minutes, Robbie Alkalil slipped out into the night.
Alkalil and the men fled in this white van.
The plan was so brazen, so perfectly timed, that staff didn't even notice he was gone until the next head count, almost 20 minutes later. And even then, the police weren't called until another 42 minutes had passed. What's worse, public alerts didn't come until almost 4 hours later. By then, Alkalil and his contractors had already abandoned their white van and disappeared, likely out of Canada. It was the kind of inside job that shook faith in the Canadian justice system. Investigators conducted search warrants at the business of a Hells Angel member suspected of helping coordinate the break, and soon, names started surfacing.
RCMP announcing Edward A.U. of Ottawa, Ryan Van Gool of Harrison Hot Springs, and Jot Potvin of Ottawa, all facing charges of prison breach and conspiracy to commit prison breach.
As of September 2025, 49-year-old John Potvin is still at large, but the other two men have been arrested, and all three got the same charge.
Confirmed charges have been approved against 3 men who allegedly assisted in the escape of Robbie Alkalil.
But the bigger question was this: how did a man under 24/7 watch, already on trial for murder, already convicted in Toronto, slip into international airspace? Rumors spread fast. Some said he used family connections in the Middle East. Others claimed he hid in Panama, moving through the same cartel channels his brother Nabil once used in Mexico. But with those kinds of crimes on his back, Interpol acted fast.
Alkalil was the subject of a red notice by Interpol.
Every border crossing, every luxury hotel, every private jet was a risk. But Robbie was a survivalist. He'd already proved it in Toronto and Vancouver. This time, the stakes were global. Retired Toronto chief Greg McLean said,
"He will do anything in his power to survive and live his life outside of custody."
He's capable of having people killed at the drop of a hat. So I would suggest to you that he's extremely dangerous.
And that leads to the haunting question: how did a man who left Canada in a contractor vest end up in Qatar, hiding in plain sight for nearly 3 years? And what drove him to commit those atrocities in the first place? To understand why the world cared so much about this arrest, you need to know what Robbie built. The Wolfpack Alliance wasn't your grandfather's mafia or biker gang. It was a loose network of killers, hustlers, and brokers who operated like a corporation. Instead of loyalty to bloodlines, they demanded loyalty to the deal. And nobody embodied that vision more than Robbie Alkalil. He didn't just talk business either. He killed people over a hunch and asserted dominance in the worst way possible. In June 2012, Toronto's Little Italy was packed with families watching a Euro Cup game when a man dressed as a construction worker calmly sat down at the Sicilian Sidewalk Cafe. Moments later, he pulled a gun and shot gangster Johnny Raposo in the head. On June 18, 2012, John Raposo sat on the packed patio of Sicilian Sidewalk Cafe watching a Euro soccer match.
An unknown person enters the patio by himself and seats at a table by himself. He's dressed in a construction-style outfit.
Minutes later, he stood up, walked over to Raposo, and shot him in the head, in front of everyone else, kids included. It was so shocking, even the adults sitting there didn't realize what had happened at first.
I heard, 4 loud pops, but I thought it was somebody letting off firecrackers or something because of the Italian game.
The authorities would learn that Raposo had been sitting with a rival Wolfpack associate, and killing him cleared the way for Robbie's coke pipeline. Court evidence later showed Robbie had rented the Chevrolet Impala used by the hitman. Encrypted messages decrypted years later read like a hitman's diary. Alkalil was instructing an associate, "We should send you to sniper school. It's been a busy week. I buried 2 guys up north." Yeah, 2. As it tragically goes with gang violence, it wasn't just Raposo unalive that day.
What I can confirm is 2 victims right now. Our homicide squad is on scene, however, they've just arrived as well.
And just months before, in Vancouver, another rival fell. 36-year-old Sandip Dura, a longtime underworld power, was gunned down at the Sheraton Wall Center in front of the Cuban women's soccer team, U.S. goalkeeper Hope Solo, and dozens of hotel guests.
We all travel all around the world, big cities, small cities, and I think it's a normal thing that crime happens.
CCTV followed the shooter all the way from the main entrance to the lobby.
And the shooter literally walked up to the table when Dore was there by himself after ordering food and shot him point blank range.
People are running for cover, ducking.
The message was that same sickening cartel message we keep seeing. The Wolfpack didn't just kill their enemies, they killed them in public, in front of the world, to show dominance. These weren't isolated acts of violence either. They were the calculated boardroom moves of a criminal alliance determined to cut out rivals and take over the market from Vancouver to Montreal. And as Robbie's name kept surfacing at the center of each hit, investigators realized they were dealing with the architect of Canada's most ruthless narcotics network. And if that was the picture in Canada, wait until you see how far the network stretched when the Wolfpack tied themselves directly to the Sinaloa cartel. Few crime families in Canada spilled as much blood as the Alkalils. They arrived in Surrey in 1990 as Palestinian refugees from Saudi Arabia, but instead of chasing safety, the brothers plunged headfirst into the underworld. Within a decade, 3 would be gunned down in cartel wars, another executed in Mexico, and Robbie left carrying a disgusting sort of empire. The first to fall was Khalil, just 19 years old when he was shot dead in Surrey in 2001. His killer, Michael Naud, claimed self-defense and walked free, only to be executed himself in suspected retaliation. 2 years later, Mahmoud was killed during a nightclub shooting at Loft 6. The pattern was clear. The family had become inseparable from Canada's gang wars. Then there was Nabil. He slipped in and out of sight for years, surfacing in Colombia, Panama, and Mexico. By 2015, he was openly working as a liaison to the Sinaloa cartel, moving cocaine on their behalf. But in 2018, at a luxury car dealership in Mexico City, his run ended violently. His assassination confirmed what police long suspected. They had become embedded in international cartel pipelines. That left Robbie as the last brother standing. He inherited not just the Wolfpack's operations, but the bloody family legacy too. Every death behind him hardened his reputation as a survivor. Every funeral seemed to push him deeper into the role of the ruthless broker. But survival comes at a price. The more Robbie outlived his brothers, the more he painted a target on his own back. Here's how authorities finally brought him to justice. By 2023, Canadian cops were seizing more than Peel Regional Police launched Project Pelican, and what they found blew past the usual gangland script.
The operation was named Project Pelican. This is one of Canada's biggest cocaine busts. Nearly 480 kilos of cocaine were recovered. The drugs are worth close to $48 million.
Yeah, half a ton of and a massive narcotics group tied to terrorists. 9 men were charged, 7 of them of Indian origin. Investigators alleged the profits weren't just fueling luxury lifestyles, but pro-Khalistan extremism, even tied to Pakistan's ISIS spy agency.
Some reports say the smugglers had the backing of ISI, that is Pakistan's spy agency. Remember, tensions between India and Canada have been running high.
This was narco-terrorism in plain sight. White powder moved north from Mexico, laundered in Ontario, then funneled into anti-India protests and arms. Suddenly, Canadian money had geopolitical consequences. India's Prime Minister Modi flew into the G7 with this bust hanging over the table. Ottawa could no longer claim it was just organized crime. And here's where the Wolfpack shadows appeared. Turns out, the same smuggling pipelines they pioneered overlapped with extremist funding streams. What started as a hustle was now fueling global terror agendas. The Wolfpack called themselves borderless, and nowhere was that clearer than in Dubai. By 2015, Alkalil and his allies were living in penthouses overlooking the Burj Khalifa, buying Lamborghinis with cash and running cartel deals from nightclubs. Photos showed them draped in gold chains, acting invincible, but their actual power came from tech. They used Phantom Secure, modified Blackberries sold out of Vancouver, to coordinate multi-ton shipments directly with the Sinaloa cartel. Encrypted phones let them cut out the middlemen, talk to Mexico's top suppliers in real time, and move money across continents. It was revolutionary, at least for a while. In 2021, feds rolled out Operation Trojan Shield.
I want you to look at this map. Every country you see in orange was involved. If you really take that in, there are relatively few that weren't a part of Operation Trojan Shield, this global sting in which organized crime gangs were sold encrypted phones that law enforcement officials could monitor. The FBI created and developed their own encrypted platform called ANOM, A-N-O-M, marketing it as made by criminals for criminals, when actually ANOM allowed them to track every message exchanged on these phones. The U.S. Attorney announcing today the unsealing of indictments against 17 distributors of these ANOM devices, calling this an unprecedented blow to crime gangs. So essentially the Trojan horse in this is the platform which allowed law enforcement to listen in and to track exactly what the bad guys were doing. So what came of it? 27 million messages, 12,000 devices sold, every single one used for illegal criminal activity, according to the FBI special agent in charge.
Secretly creating their own unbreakable encrypted network, ANOM. The Wolfpack adopted it, not knowing every text, every photo, every murder plot was being read live by authorities.
The very devices that the criminals used to hide their crimes were actually a beacon for law enforcement.
U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of California, Randy Grossman, revealed Tuesday how Operation Trojan Shield recruited a former distributor of a recently shut down criminal communication network who developed a new encrypted messaging app called ANOM. With ANOM under FBI control, the FBI sent its new informant to sell ANOM phones to distributors all around the world.
ANOM's distributors, administrators, and agents had so much confidence in the secrecy of their devices that they openly marketed them to other potential users as designed by criminals for criminals.
In 3 years, the FBI sold more than 12,000 of its spying devices to crime rings in more than 100 countries. And then, with an archive of 20 million messages sent through ANIM, the Bureau contacted law enforcement agencies around the world with the evidence they needed to arrest the bad guys.
For the first time, police saw Robbie's empire in raw detail. The drug loads, the cash, even him bragging about sniper school. Feds knew his every move, and yet Alkalil still managed to escape and hide for 3 years. In the end, it wasn't gunfire that brought him down, it was pressure. Interpol's red notice pinned him in place, his fake passports triggered alarms, and anonymous tips in the Middle East tipped off Qatar's police. In the words of this netizen, even these guys who go to the UAE are working on limited resources, because at this point, everyone knows Dubai just waits for your money to run out and hands you over. Now, the man who terrorized Canada is rotting in a Qatar prison, and his empire is pretty much shattered. But even here, nothing is simple. Canada doesn't have an extradition treaty with Qatar, which means every step toward bringing him home has to be negotiated case by case, wrapped in politics.
One possibility is, in fact, the Canadian is detained as a murderer in a Qatari jail because of the red notice. The other possibility is our Canadian murderer is running around scot-free in Qatar.
That legal limbo is exactly what experts warned about. He could languish in a foreign jail indefinitely, or he could slip through the cracks and vanish again. And with a man like Alkalil, whose entire career was built on exploiting loopholes and weak spots, the idea of him walking free is a nightmare scenario. And if he can shake the courts from the other part of the globe, imagine what the remnants of his network are still doing on Canadian streets right now. Robbie's capture is being celebrated on Canadian news.
The hunt for convicted killer Robbie Alkalil is over.
The Wolfpack was supposed to be the future. Encrypted phones, cartel pipelines, Dubai penthouses. Now its star boss is caged, and its alliances fractured. On paper, that almost sounds like hope to crush all cartels forever. But on the ground, the scars don't heal so quickly. The pipelines they opened keep flowing. The smuggling routes through ports and border towns still exist, and families across Canada are left to pick up the pieces in neighborhoods hollowed out by addiction and crime. One store owner shows the grim reality today.
Tougher and tougher every day.
Even with 35 cameras
here also,
watching the aisles,
there also,
the stealing hasn't stopped.
I told my wife, I think we did the mistake by coming to this country.
This is the legacy of Canada's underworld wars. Not just blood on cafe patios, but ordinary families drowning under the weight of cartel chaos. The Wolfpack may be shattered, but the damage they left behind lives on. So the real question is whether Robbie's fall even matters. Can this arrest mark the end of an era, or does it just clear the way for the next Wolfpack boss to rise from the rubble? Please feel free to share your thoughts with us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth videos like this. Meanwhile, click on any of the cards on your screen right now to watch more of our videos.